I am 67 years old. Bet you couldn't tell that. I am 67 years old. I am fierce for dogs. I was fierce for dogs when I was 4. My dad bought me an English Springer Spaniel puppy. He had long brown ears, dark brown eyes. He was brown and white all over, and his tail wagged like he was a madman. We called him Skipper. Now, my mom had me, 4½, my sister, 1, my grandfather who lived with us, who was very ill, and my dad worked all day and went to school all night. My mother needed a puppy like she needed a hole in the head. But Dad said, no, Doris, we're going to keep the puppy. Susan loves him. Well, that was the story till he became allergic. His eyes swelled shut, his nose ran, he coughed, he choked, he filled out with hives. They gave Skipper away to a good farm. That's what they told me. I was heartbroken because I was fierce for dogs. When I was 11, we moved into a neighborhood where the houses were separate, one from another, and there were yards and trees and dogs. Well, there were kids, but who needed kids? I mean, a dog loves you better than a kid is ever going to love you. And 2 houses down, it was the Dooleys. They had 3 handsome boys, and you would think at 11 I might have cared. No, what they had even better was Rusty. He was a cross between a German Shepherd and a Beagle, and his ears weren't real long or real tall. They just did a nice little flap over. He wasn't the brightest dog, he was sort of da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. But he was loyal, and he would go anywhere with me, and I would go back to the Dooley's backyard down to Alabama Court, and there I would pick up Bonnie. Now, Bonnie was a collie. She had tulip ears, she was tawny all over, and she was a collie that still had brains. They don't have brains anymore, they just have needles for brains, but she had brains and a sweet snout, and she would go anywhere with me. And we would walk down the length of Alabama Road and stop at Linda's house. Linda was in my grade, in my class. I didn't care anything about Linda. She had a dog. She had a dog named Flicka. It was a Great Dane, came up to my shoulder, fawn-colored, up ears, dark mask. And we would head over to Shepherd Pratt Hospital. Now, that was what we called, in those days, an insane asylum. And we would walk back, and there was dark brick buildings, and it was turrets and towers and gables, and I thought, ooh, the crazier you are, the higher you go? I thought, maybe. Don't look at me from those windows. But Shepherd Pratt was built on a farm, because that's how they did insane asylums. They figured you'd raise your own food. So there were chickens and there were pigs, but what I liked was there were 60 head of Hereford steers, mamas, babies, red and white. I liked them. Now Rusty and Flicka and I would get behind that herd of steers and we'd drive them out. I'd go, get him, get him, get him. Bonnie, she'd circle around like the good herd dog she was and bring him back, and circle around and bring him back. But still, I was fierce for dogs, and there was not a dog in my neighborhood that could live in my house. So I was reduced to looking for dogs in books. We didn't have Wikipedia. We had the Encyclopedia Britannica, 26 volumes and a yearbook every year. And I pulled out D for dogs, and I opened it up. 151 breeds of dogs, glossy colors, and I memorized every one of them. And I was looking for dogs that didn't shed. I said, Mom, look, there's an Airedale, it doesn't shed. She said, no, they bite. Oh. I said, well, look, Mom, Dad, look at this. We could get a poodle. And they sat up together at the dining room table and said, we are not poodle people. I didn't know there was any such thing as poodle people. I said, well, I'm not talking about this little fluffy apricot thing that sits in a cup. Look at this one, Dad. It comes right up to your thigh. It swims. It retrieves. No, we are not poodle people. Well, then I found a dog. It was a miniature schnauzer. It was all salt and pepper color, brick ears, eyebrows, whiskers, dark eyes. I said, Dad, look at this one. It doesn't shed. And Dad went, ooh, yeah. I said, what, Dad? He said, my dad was an engineer for the Pennsy Railroad, and he brought home a terrier mix from the boxcars, looked just like that. We named her Buttons. We're getting a dog that looks like that. So we went up into Harford County, and we brought home Buttons at Christmas time. There wasn't going to have another name, Buttons. And I was fierce for Buttons, and Buttons was fierce for me. I took her everywhere. I put her in the basket of my bike, and we would bicycle 10 miles out to Worthington Valley and look at the horses. I'd take her into the department stores, Hutzler's, and she'd sit on a bench while I tried on wool skirts, because girls didn't wear pants then. But mostly, we went up to Shepherd Pratt Hospital. Now let me tell you, a terrier herds differently than anything else. They get right underneath that cow's feet. The cows are moving like that. So I had Flicka on one side, Rusty on the other, and Buttons. And we drove those cows out, and Bonnie bring them back home. But we'd only had Buttons for a year when my dad had a heart attack and died. And I was crazy, wild. I was so sad and so angry. I thought I was just going to tear apart. I started going up to Shepherd Pratt every day, after school, after chores, on the weekend, and I would have Buttons, and I'd have Flicka, and I'd have Rusty and Bonnie, and we would drive those cows. And some days I'd look up at that hospital and think, I feel so crazy, I'm gonna be in one of those windows. And one day I just needed to bust through something. And I had Rusty and Flicka and Buttons and Bonnie, and we began to drive those cows. And I'm going, get them, get them, get them. 60 head of cattle on the move, and I'm going, get them, get them, get them. And we went down a hill, through a creek, up through a beech woods, and hit the first barbed wire fence, boing, through it. Then down underneath the abandoned railroad trestle and a second barbed wire fence, boing, and we were through it. And then down through the oaks and up, and through the last barbed wire fence, boing, we were free at last, woohoo! 60 head of cattle moving in front of us behind Lidley Tall Elementary School. Go, I said, go! And those cows going, moo, 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 60 head of cattle. And we went up to the back of Towson State University. Those cows are running free. And the dogs, Bonnie giving up. Up behind the top of Towson State University, students dropping books, running for cattle, going, yes, free at last. And then I got to the top of Towson State University, top of the hill next to the clock tower, and went, oops. I'd forgotten something I'd known all along. Below the college was York Road, 2 lanes going south, 2 lanes going north, and 60 head of cattle headed for that street. And I went, woo, I started something I can't end. And I hollered back for the dog, which was my dog call, and they all came back, and I said, I'm going home now. Well, I went home, but 60 head of cattle, hit York Road, and the cars went, hitting the sidewalks, hitting the grass. I said, I'm going home now. I went on home. Now, my mom was selling real estate then because we had 4 kids and my grandfather to support, and she was supposed to be home at 6 o'clock, but she didn't come. 6:30 came and went. 7 o'clock came and went. 7:30, she came in the door. Her eyes looked a little beady. Her red hair was kind of wild. I said, hi, Mom. She said, cows. Oh, cows. What about cows, Mom? They're all over York Road. Have you ever seen policemen try to round up cows? No, Mom, I've missed that. My mom just stared at me, and I buttoned my lip and buttoned hers, and And if a dog and a girl could wink, we did. My mom was 43 years old that year. She died when she was 79, and she never, ever, ever knew who turned the cows loose on York Road. I'm 67 years old. I've got a good herding dog, an Australian Shepherd. His name is River. I am still fierce for dogs. Thank you.